I'm just going to look at the high raglan. Obviously the only difference between the other different ones is where your lines are drawn. Alright, the whole idea of using the shaded piece, which is the body, so just remember that, cutting it off, sticking it onto, and tracing, so there'll be a lot of tracing going on. And you're going to end up, basically you're just moving that body piece and attaching it, joining it onto the sleeve. Now on the sleeve, normally when we sew the sleeve head in, we have ease. Yeah, that is basically, that ease is a dart, and that is so that the sleeve goes around the shoulder. All right, that's all that's for, because you've got a flat pattern piece like this and you need that to bend around. So when you join it, this has to become smaller to join onto the armhole to allow that to go round. We need that shape to go over our shoulder. So with the raglan, we have this either as a dart, or we can cut it all the way down and have an overarm seam. So we're using it, and you can see the elbow dart's been put into the wrist. So that's just how we would use the pattern, sleeve pattern, to draft it, have it with the elbow dart in the sleeve. And then you can do whatever you want with your fronts and backs, but we're just going to use the normal blocks. So I've just got my printout ones. So matching on your handout, your confusing image here is showing you how you place your pattern pieces onto your sleeve to do your draft lines. Now this is the bit that will confuse you, how you do it. So we'll get those highlighters out, all right, how you're going to do it and what becomes what pattern piece. But basically where that overlapped here and here, that's like those balance notches, so that's at the cross front and cross back. So you're going to use that image with your sleeve, so you can keep the elbow dart there, or you can open it up and put it in the bottom, but just, it might be a short sleeve you're doing or something like that. We're just working on that top bit. So we've got our sleeve there, so we have the front piece here and then the back, and you can see those balance notches. All right, so this depends, you know, how bag it is and the fit, but this effectively works like a gusset, these two crossover bits, and then this seam here is eliminated, and they become joined together, and you're just going to have to soften these curves. Don't draw them as angles unless you wanted a particular angle, but normally it's quite a soft shape. So we're all going to do it together, and what we're going to do is we're going to get our sleeve and we're going to place and match those balance notches. And you can see here, this is overlapping. I've got a bit of a gap here. I've explained earlier that the raglan sleeve isn't the best fitting, that you quite often end up with bagginess around the cross front, cross back. That's because you've got this extra fabric. Okay, you've got to consider the shoulder. You know, you might not want them quite matched there. You might do this and then have a bigger gusset here and have less. So this is the fit you want, the style you want, the look you want. You know, you're placing this on. So it's all about how you're best fitting it on and where you want that style line to be. So obviously if you overlap them less here, then that raglan style line is much further up. So you just generally go around that section there, and if you end up with a bit of extra fabric, you just have to remember that that's why it's not as good fitting as others. But I'm going to just stick that down with a bit of sellotape just to hold it in place, and then we can do the same with the front. That balance notch, you don't want to overlap this section, because what that does is that reduces the movement across your shoulder. So it's important to have that so it just butts up and touches the sleeve. It doesn't actually overlap it. That's why it's better to have a little bit gathered here. It comes that way round. We'll just stick that down. You'll just draw your blocks onto your pattern paper and make a draft, but I just think this is a good way for you to understand what you're doing, how you're doing it. Now you've just got to do your style line. Whereabouts into the neck do you want it? And these are your design decisions. So the bust dart, you might be best off temporarily moving it somewhere else, because you're not going to want that in the way. You know, if you wanted seams up to it or princess seams and things, you consider moving it later, but for now I would just move that out the way so it doesn't confuse my raglan line. And I want this, now I'm considering from my body shape from this underarm seam, and then I'm going to create that style line. Obviously this is the front, centre front. How high, how much of it do you want showing on the shoulder? How much do you want into the neck? So that will be where they cross over, is where your sort of raglan style line comes up. I mean, it could have a shape like this, it doesn't have to be square. Remember, you can change shapes, directions and make different raglan style lines. And then we do the same on the back.
Can we put a line in that in our project?
So again, you've got the shoulder dart, but when we cut this line off onto the raglan, we can just close that bit, and that seam line might become ease or something like that. So we're just going to take that and not worry too much about that shoulder dart for the minute. Again, the angles might be slightly different, or I might want that one to be an opposite shape depending on my design. You know, you might want that wriggle, that curve. It is just a seam line, you're adding on one and onto the other. So we can cut along this line easily, make sure these are stuck together, and that bit will be simple to understand. And that goes down to there, and I'm just going to get rid of that shoulder dart, join that shoulder dart up. So I have still got my shoulder dart in my neck there. It's nice to keep as many seam shapes as you want. But if you wanted to eliminate it, you could always have cut it off the shoulder before you join it together. So that bit's easy to understand. And I've joined this one to here. But here, obviously this is this one, so that's fine when you're tracing it off as a draft, and that one keeps it on there. So I can actually take that pattern piece off now. Alright, and I've got my back one with the raglan, and then I've got my what was on my back stuck on my sleeve. Once we've done, I've removed the back, it doesn't matter if you're doing the back or the front, you're going to cut it along your style line for your front. Okay, and obviously I didn't stick mine together at that underarm. So I've now got my front and back, and I'll sort out where I'm putting my bust dart later on. That's just a temporary dart. So I've just cut along both of them, so you can see where it was, and I've just taken my front, and that is now joined onto my sleeve, looking very, very strange. Now we've got this distance between that the two shoulders there, that would normally be your ease, because we want to shape it over the shoulder, as we've discovered. So remember, curvy, our shoulders are curvy. Okay, this is your centre of your sleeve, your straight grain will be in the centre. So you could just draw that as a triangle if you wanted an angled shoulder that sort of looked something like that. But normally we soften them. So we just continue that shoulder line and just make a soft curvy dart. Think about the shoulder. So you can see here, that is my shoulder going down and over the overarm. So you can see exactly the look that raglan gives you, that nice shoulder. Okay, so we're going to create that as a dart. Now remember, this is net, no seam allowances on it at the minute. So we're just going to continue that round and make a nice little dart. So don't necessarily cut anything off the shoulder at this point, and that's going to be a dart. Okay. So you can see this is why the raglan becomes a bit baggy, because you've got extra fabric here. you have specific raglan shoulder pads which are designed, and they are capped a bit like this, and they come over, and then so they come all the way down to here, the shoulder darts, because it's a soft round shoulder, big padded shoulder. That's what we're creating. So we now have our basic pattern pieces very badly drafted. We then trace them off, add seam allowance, soften all these shapes, okay, unless you specifically were wanting angles. This is the neck. Remember, do not soften that neck. That when it needs to continue to be the neck. This line here, this is the neck, and these are the necks here. Okay, so that's what you need to remember, that small little point is key. Don't get rid of and soften those. But if you've got some lumps and bumps here, you might want to soften them, and obviously you just trace over that. Now you might decide that you want that as two pieces, so obviously you could have that sewn together and that sewn as a dart, and you can see that nice shape then, that three-dimensional sleeve shape, and that's the raglan sleeve that you're producing. But you might, and you can have a seam all the way down here, and it literally just goes all the way. And then if you have that, you can easily eliminate these darts if you want to. All right, we can just slash them out. Not quite the best fit, a little bit of a pattern cutter tweak, because you can see it's a little bit taking up some of the space. But if we didn't want that elbow dart, or you could remove half of it and have half of it as ease. So these are your design decisions that you might want to take. That fashion over fit that I often talk about.
I mean, I will be like really like.
Still, when we remove that dart, we've still got it here. This is the straight grain, that first bit. We've still got that elbow dart. It's just gone into the seam. So we can see that we've got the wrist dart, elbow dart here, and then we've got the shoulder dart there. So that's the high raglan. The only difference, obviously, if you wanted a lower raglan, is where you join that line and the extra bits that you move around and put on. But that there, so it could be a dart, or you could make it a seam. And just remember your notches, as important as ever. And that's that.